Andy, what's the best split for building muscle? What's the best split for getting lean? It's all about what are you doing, and therefore what is the best strategy to structure your workout based on your own training. Welcome to another episode of the Smart Strength Training Podcast. So my name is Andy Vincent. I'm here to give you the evidence behind popular fitness topics. And today is podcast episode 43. And I'm talking about how to structure your training week to get better results, but also to manage recovery. So training structure, training splits, how many days per week should I train? Should I do push-pull legs, full body? All questions I get asked a lot. And it's not like a simple, you should do this or that for this goal or this outcome. There are some nuances to it, and I want to explain those nuances so you can understand what you need to do so you're going to be better informed to make those decisions yourself because you understand the process. Thinking about the last podcast, hopefully you listened to that when I spoke about muscle damage and recovery and this idea of how we get better muscle growth. So we know that training is the stimulus. We know that with progressive forms of training, we create a stimulus on the muscular system, but that's actually not what really creates the results we're after. What creates the results is the ability to adapt. So we need that high level of stimulus and we need to adapt. Obviously, there's lots of elements to adaptations where nutrition and sleep come into play. But for this podcast, we're going to talk about the recovery from smart programming. Because as you train, you accumulate fatigue. Fatigue is going to affect things. I spoke in the last video about effectively muscle damage, which is what we classify as peripheral fatigue. But there's also central fatigue, often called central nervous system fatigue. I think the word central fatigue or the expression central fatigue is a more accurate expression. And there's also just psychological elements of if you're sore, if you're training hard on back-to-back days, it's just hard to get yourself psyched up to train. So a poorly structured program can really affect performance. It also is likely to affect your consistency because maybe it's not as enjoyable to do those sorts of sessions. You're more likely to run into roadblocks with plateaus if you've got a poorly designed program because it might be harder to progress overall. And potentially if you're struggling in that situation, potentially that could also increase your injury risk. But really to remember that recovery isn't just rest. It's not just taking 24 hours at the gym. It's not just sleep. It's also about having an intelligently designed program that actually facilitates your ability to progress. So first thing we're going to talk about is training splits, because that's often a question that I get asked. What is the best split for X, Y, and Z? So what are the main splits that we can do? I think most people, let's talk about the main ones that most people might have heard of. Full body training. So you do upper and lower push, pull, hinge, squat in each day. Upper, lower, so obviously the upper body or the lower body. There are push-pull workouts, depending on what you've heard of push-pull. You might have push-pull legs, where you do upper body pushing, lower body pulling, and then a separate leg day. You also can have push-pull, where your push day incorporates your squat patterns, and your pull day incorporates your hinge patterns. And you can do a hybrid where you mix up those splits. You might have one day full body and an upper lower day. So you can do a combination of those. So let's sort of go through them and sort of like the pros and cons. So full body training is really good for sort of 2 to 4 times per week. It is a really nice way to manage recovery overall because you're only ever doing one push, one pull, one hinge, one squat, and you train each muscle once in a workout. So it will mitigate fatigue. It's a really nice way to sort of structure a program overall. Often you hear people say that it's good for new lifters, but it's good for everyone, really. I like it because with a programming structure, it it requires probably a little bit less thinking around what you need to manage in the workout overall. Often there can be some overlapping issues by doing upper body if you just dump too many of the wrong type of upper body exercise into a workout. Whereas full body training is a little bit more, a little bit easier to program and not have to worry about that kind of stuff. So upper lower splits. So usually if you're training sort of 4 times per week, if you're training twice per week, you're going to do full body workouts. If you're doing upper lower, it really is 4 times per week. So you can roll through them twice. It's a really nice one for balancing recovery and training frequency. So you train each muscle group twice per week and you get a nice amount of recovery. If you're doing upper on Monday, lower on Tuesday, rest Wednesday, upper Thursday, you get a decent amount of time recovery from each one, and it manages that frequency, like I said, overall. There are some issues, like I said, if you're building an upper body workout, you still want to make sure you're getting some balance in that workout. So you've got your pushes and your pulls for upper body. You can be pushing horizontally in line with the chest. I can be pushing vertically over the head. Just want to make sure you're balancing those out. So it makes it a little bit more thinking when it comes to the actual program itself, but really, really good, easy modifiable. And there are some key benefits I like around it. If you're doing other types of training and you might want to like rest the legs or rest the upper, it makes sense. I'll come on to that in just a second. So the classic push-pull legs in the framework of doing a upper body push, upper body pull, and legs, then does train the majority of muscle groups twice per week. It is going to be done for 3 times per week or 6 times per week. Definitely you get enough recovery with this. Certainly if you're just doing it 3 times per week, a push day for upper body, a pull day. So you're working each muscle group once per week. Super, super easy to sort of build in recovery in the week. But you get a lot of overlapping fatigue if you're putting all your upper body pushes. So my chest press, my chest press machine, and my chest fly, I'm getting a lot of overlapping fatigue in there. So it is the sort of program structure that can easily lead to poor programming if you're not too sure how to program. Just not in that's what I do. I never program push-pull legs. I think it is a little bit of a relic of the programming sort of like world. Let's talk about the kind of classic bodybuilding splits: a chest day, back day, shoulder day, arm day, and leg day. I kind of laugh talking about these splits because they're still used. I would probably say in a training world, certainly in bodybuilding style gyms or looking around gyms, I would say these are the most used training splits. And I'd also argue the most outdated. I sort of smile and laugh because I've been in many arguments online and in person where people avidly defend these splits. If you like doing them, that's absolutely great. But in a second, we'll go through the research, but they're really not backed up by the research, or they're certainly not better. So therefore, if they're not better and there are some issues with it around that overlapping fatigue, I mentioned if you're doing a push day, you might have an issue with doing all your chest exercises in one day. Well, if you're doing a chest day, you're definitely going to have issues overall. So I would say for the average person, unless you're taking some sort of enhancement when it comes to your ability to recover, recognizing that bodybuilding is a non-drug tested or is usually predominantly a non-drug tested sport, and there are drug tested federations, but in a non-drug tested sport, if someone wants to do chest day and they're taking various performance enhancing drugs, they're going to have less issues than you and I when it comes to having a chest press, a dumbbell chest press, a chest fly, a pullover, all in the same workout. So I don't think they're that smart. I love hybrid mixes, like I mentioned, full body, upper, lower, mixing up that sort of like need to have various things in there, because then what a hybrid mix really does is when I'm talking to a client and I can hear them say to me, right, Andy, I want to do 2 runs per week. I want to lift weights 3 times per week, 4 times per week. A hybrid split then gives me the option of building obvious recovery in, and that comes into this real nicely. So someone's doing concurrent training. The most obvious one is, I want to run twice per week, Andy, and I want to train. Well, maybe a full body workout isn't always the smartest way to go, because each of those workouts is going to be quite fatiguing. And maybe if they're training 3 times per week, I can't do upper lower, but I do like having upper lower. So maybe I could do an upper lower full body. So upper body day, obviously no issue with lower body. So it gives that lovely window of rest. Lower body quite clearly is a hard lower body session, and full body is that nice sort of mix of. So therefore the upper body workout and the full body workout become the sort of moving parts in the week that I can sandwich around my runs or my hardest run to make sure I'm rested and I can keep my leg day as far away from my hardest run as possible. And that's where training splits become really, really smart. It's less around, Andy, what's the best split for building muscle? What's the best split for getting lean? It's all about what are you doing? And therefore, what is the best strategy to structure your workout based on your own training? So why did I say that the chest day, back day, leg day weren't necessarily supported by the science? So Brad Schoenfeld did a meta-analysis in 2016 that showed that a training frequency of twice per week, so training a muscle group twice per week, was optimal for hypertrophy in most populations, for most people. This increased muscle protein synthesis without having excessive fatigue placed on muscle. So if I'm trying to do 10 sets of, let's say, quad-based work, thigh-based work, rather than just dumping all 10 into one workout, spread it out 5 sets in 2 workouts each. So you might have one exercise with 3 sets and one exercise with 2 sets. So you might have a leg press in one day with a leg extension machine in the other, and then a squat. So 3 sets of leg press and 2 sets of leg extension. Then I might have a squat in the other day with a walking lunge or something similar. So 3 sets of squat, 2 sets of walking lunge. 10 total sets accumulated across 2 sessions. 3 times per week doesn't seem to be much better unless you have more advanced lifters that are lifting much, much more total work, and therefore they are able to spread out the workload across the week and manage their ability to progress. I spoke in the last podcast about progressive overload being so important, that repeated bouts effect. If you're strong and you're able to lift very close to your max or a lot of external load, maybe you want to divide it out over 3 sessions. Or if someone actually is quite new to exercise and they're doing more isolation work, if I'm doing leg extension machine multiple times per week, or a lying leg extension machine and a seated leg extension machine, and I'm just doing isolation based work, or like arms, for example, you might, where it's just often just elbow flexion for biceps, you might want to split that out across maybe more than just 2 days. And the once per week, like, there was early research that showed between once per week and twice per week, it didn't really make a difference. It was kind of equivocal. The more research we've had is starting to lean more in a direction of twice per week. The bros will still argue that once per week is still equal to twice per week. My argument is you just got to really know what you're doing in those workouts. And it's very, very hard to not have this sort of like overlapping fatigue. So for you and I think there's too many errors that can be made programming those sort of bro splits. The research is starting to lean in the direction of favor of training each muscle group twice per week. And the idea really is, what we're trying to do is we're trying to space out intense workouts, but also space out really hard sets. So when we think of like, what is an intense session? An intense session is going to be an exercise, or something, an intense exercise is going to be an exercise where you're using a lot of external load. So your squats, your leg presses, those sorts of things, they are going to cause a lot of central fatigue. They're very, very stimulating, but they're very, very taxing. And you generally want to get them apart. And if you've got a workout structure where you're doing leg press, squat in the same workout, so hard to push those too hard. So just a sensible strategic strategy is to try and gap them. I actually do really like training the same muscle group 3 times per week, and then you can quite logically gap the taxing exercises. I can have a squat in one day, very taxing. I can have a leg extension in the next day, not particularly taxing. I could have a leg press in the day after, taxing. So I've actually gapped my taxing knee dominant exercises across the workout, which is why I like this idea of like thinking about the how you're going to organize your workouts so you can just get some of these big exercises apart. And you can do a little bit of this, like not on the fly, but you can assess your strategy, your programming, and adjust accordingly. I've actually noticed that squatting on a Monday and then doing a leg press on a Wednesday, I'm just knackered. So I'm going to try doing a leg extension instead on a Wednesday. Then I'll do my leg press on the Friday, and then you sort of realize, oh, actually, that actually protects my my ability to progress a little bit better. And that kind of feedback loop, that kind of assessment is gold. And to be honest, that's where I guess I learned to program. Well, not in my own training, talking to clients, getting client feedback. It's really nice now that this stuff is actually supported by the literature, and it kind of backs up like what a lot of trainers like myself were just feeling anyway in our programming by talking to clients and listening. And now we have research to back it up, that it's kind of logical. And when you speak to enough people in the gym, it plays out beautifully as a really great way to focus on sort of recovery. The other thing as well, of course, is that when it comes to taxing sessions, we also want to think about sleep. If you just got lots of grueling, brutal sessions, then sleep, energy intake, so food intake, nutritional intake, protein intake, stress coming from work, hydration, all plays into this overall. So if your workout structure is just walloping the life out of you and we haven't got this sort of sense of gapping our workouts a little bit, it is super hard to progress. And we recognize that in a training block, 12 weeks, 16 weeks, 20 weeks, however long your overall program block lasts, we're applying progressive overload. By week, I don't know, it's hard to say, but like week 6, you've got 6 weeks of laid progression. By week 8, 10, and 12, things are getting really tough. So what might be okay in week 1, 2, and 3 isn't going to be okay in week 12 onwards. And that's where people come into major issues. They start saying, Andy, I'm plateauing. What should I do? Then I look at their overall training structure. I'm like, well, actually, your training structure is just not conducive to you being able to progress. And a little bit of better organization can really help with that, because we do recognize that your recovery or your readiness for exercise is going to be so susceptible to things like nutrition, sleep, stress, hydration, that layering a poorly programmed workout on top is just one of those things that could trip you up a little bit further, and it can go a long way to try and mitigate the sort of the taxing elements of training overall. So most people that follow me are women. So I want to also just give some sort of like female considerations, let's say, when it comes to programming. Women have better blood flow and therefore can generally manage more volume. So the sort of like the old school mindset of like, you can't train chest on back-to-back days. That's probably more the bros that can't do that. Certainly if I'm doing a hard bench press on Monday, I'm going to really struggle to do a hard dumbbell chest press on day 2. Probably for women, or not all women. We can't just, and I find that it's really frustrating in the female space that too many content creators just bundle all women into one category, like every single woman's the same, rather than just saying across the entire population of women, there's going to be huge variations in it. But generally speaking, women have better blood flow, and generally speaking, women can manage more volume. I have definitely got clients that is not true for, and we've just found out through a bit of trial and error going through it. It's also worthwhile thinking about how the menstrual cycle will, of course, affect a woman's readiness for exercise. You don't need to program accordingly. The idea of organizing your workout around the menstrual cycle, cycle syncing, has been well and truly debunked now. So it's not the sort of thing you need to do, but there needs to be an awareness of in yourself what days, if you're regular with your cycle and you're regular with when your energy drops throughout, you don't want to have a workout that's really peaking and becoming very hard weeks sort of 6, 8, 10, 12. When your menstrual cycle is coming on, and if you've got a workout that you know is going to be absolutely brutal that particular week, because you've got these 8, 10, 12 weeks of layered progression, and workouts will get significantly harder as a block of training, 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks progresses. A little bit more focus on just recovery protocols overall. So deloads you may have heard of before, but really what we want is a mindset around auto-regulation. If you're coming into a workout in week 12, you've just come onto a period, or you're coming onto a period, you know your energy is a bit flat, you probably want to deload a few sessions or auto-regulate the intensity of a few sessions by managing the volume. So dropping a set or 2 out of each exercise, and or managing the workload overall. You definitely do not need to try and sync your training program to your cycle, but you definitely do want to think about how to regulate the intensity. Understand the most taxing components of strength training is the amount of load that you lift and the amount of hard working sets that you accumulate per muscle group and modifying it accordingly. And of course, then just to state that you want to be tracking your progress throughout this. You want to be tracking your load, tracking your reps performed, and then just sort of thinking about like your readiness for exercise. So if you are just generally feeling flat in your workout, struggling both physically to do the sessions, but also psychologically to get yourself like revved up for the workouts. If that's happening a little bit towards the latter stages of a block, absolutely fine. If it's happening a lot in the midpoint of a block of training, so I say block of training, I mean like 12, 16 weeks, the overall length of this block. If it's happening in weeks, say 4 to 8, that's pretty soon for it to be happening in a training block. If it's happening in like weeks 12 through 16, we don't mind so much. But tracking your load, having sort of some sort of performance metric in there is really important. RAR scores, so repetitions in reserve, or RPE scores, rating of perceived exertion, which I've mentioned on previous podcasts. I actually mentioned that on the last podcast. All very, very useful things to do. So I hope it makes sense. The structure of your workout can really help with your ability to progress the workout overall, to recover from one bout of training to the next. So it's not a simple case of saying this is the best split. That should all make sense now, right? Yeah, because I'm trying to do Pilates once a week, yoga once per week, 2 runs per week, and 3 strength training sessions, or whatever it is that you're trying to manage. For people that are just trying to get consistent with twice per week, then full body training is obvious. So in that situation, it's really easy to say, yeah, that's the best type of training for you. You'll get really good results on training twice per week with a full body workout because it covers that base of training each muscle group twice per week. So definitely are some situations where it's really simple to say full body training. But when it comes to maybe a bit more higher frequency training, then it can get a little bit more complex or complicated. And especially if someone's doing a mixed modalities or concurrent training where there's more cardio coming in as well. So hopefully it makes sense. Hopefully that gives you a good idea of what you might need to think about with your training and how to organize it. And I am available for online personal training if you want help putting this into practice in your own training and aligning your nutrition to match your training.